In the forests of Africa, Asia and Latin America, communities like this one are used to their territory being threatened by miners, illegal loggers and land grabbers. But now, in addition to these threats, they are facing a new kind of greed, the greed of those who mine the air, the carbon market proponents.
We have suffered a lot of harassment from companies that want to buy carbon within our communities.
They came here saying that as community members and owners of our land, we could take and sell carbon credits. I didn't know what REDD was or what carbon credits were, and neither did my people.
When it was timber exploitation, we would watch the barges go by with the logs, and we saw all our wealth going to another region. Not today. Today it is the carbon market, and this time we don't see anything. In other words, what is being sold when there is nothing you can see, touch, or feel.
And what are carbon credits? Who buys them? Who issues them? What do they solve? What are we talking about?
What is this market? The forest has been there for many years, and the communities have been protecting it for many years. And now a project is coming to save the forest?
And the company is going in there, offering millions for the communities to just lie in their hammocks and do nothing. I have a friend who always says that he gets suspicious when money is involved. And that's also what happened to me. I became suspicious.
These are biopirates trying to subjugate indigenous peoples through lies, so that they get the community's approval via a contract with the company, so that the company can then trade carbon in the name of the community.
To address this complex reality, representatives of communities from different countries came together in the Capô indigenous territory in the Brazilian Amazon.
This dialogue is very important for us because we want to learn a lot of information from other countries, from leaders who have come here, so that we can understand these carbon credits. Because many people have already had experiences with carbon credits, and they are already going through problems and difficulties. This is what we have to talk about amongst ourselves to debate against REDD.
Brothers and sisters, today is a historic day for us, and if we are here, it is to claim our rights as indigenous peoples. And the carbon projects are causing division within the peoples and within indigenous families.
They talked about the different strategies that companies, NGOs and governments use to approach their communities and sell carbon credits from their territories.
They were very strategic because they used an indigenous person. They used her to get to us. But they did not actually hold a prior consultation in our territory. They held it in the city. They paid for people's hotels and meals. They treated them very well in order to be able to greenlight the project.
We are also here to contribute, to share some of our experiences. This agreement was made in isolation. They only invited a few leaders and a few people, and with that they made it look like they had the support of all of our people so that they could access the carbon credits. We rejected this, saying that we, the Munduruku people, did not accept this project in our territory.
They asked us to sign meeting minutes verifying the presence of the inhabitants who were at the meeting. And I later found out through a project document that this list that they had requested was used to verify that the people were in agreement with the project and the people were not. They did not even know that this list was going to be used to say they were in agreement with the project. When I discovered this, The project had already sold a lot of carbon credits.
Me visitaron dos personas manifestando querer hablar.
Two people visited me, saying they wanted to speak with the leaders of my territory. They wanted to move forward on a project with children and the elderly. And they brought gifts and an invitation to a meeting that was held in the territory. When they left, the women noticed they were pulling out a drone. Why do you have that drone? What is it for? Oh, that's just so we can get a better understanding of the area. This really got our attention and concerned us. We got to the bottom of it and found out that they already had an established carbon credit business in our territory, which we were not aware of.
We began to notice a lot of outsiders whom we perceived were not from the region or territory, and we investigated to understand what those people were doing there. This is how we found out that there was a project within the territory. We found this out after it had been going on for 10 years, and we were able to initiate a lawsuit against Vera, which had certified the REDD project in the community's territory. This is how the project was slowed down, not stopped, but slowed down, and now it is in the courts.
We did not know what the carbon market was. Yet there was a contract that had been signed without a consultation, without the free and informed consent of the communities. And when we discovered this and the signed contract, we began to meet in the communities, in assemblies, and all of our communities together concluded that this contract was not welcome in the territories, since it has a time frame of 30 years, extendable to 100 years. The contract contained some clauses that were not in alignment with our culture or with nature. They were not in alignment with the context of our community and territory. So, we got some legal and technical advice, and the contract has been suspended until the process of prior consultation moves forward.
The meeting participants also wanted to know what had happened in communities on other continents. To this end, they watched testimonies that had been recorded for them. The testimonies show that women suffer from the most severe impacts, and yet their voices are rarely heard.
REDD has a huge impact on women, especially in our village, because the women in our village were prohibited from entering the forest. This means that women were also prohibited from farming. We were not able to grow rice because we were not allowed to burn the forest, which is the way that we traditionally grow crops. Also, the women were no longer allowed to collect firewood or medicinal plants. This has also affected the men who used to hunt in the forest. This has affected us because we are very dependent on the forest.
I began to plant trees for the EcoTrust Carbon project. I upheld the agreement by planting the trees that EcoTrust had asked me to. In return, they promised me money to take care of my children, which they never gave me. Since I planted those trees, I have not made a single dollar from them, but I have children to take care of and to feed. It got to a point where I could not guarantee that I could provide food for my children through the planting of those trees. So I decided to cut down the trees and plant banana trees, as you can see in the background. When I cut down the trees and started growing food, they began to threaten me, calling me on the phone in the afternoon and at night.
The origin of the carbon market dates back more than 30 years, but in 2015, it received a major boost with the signing of the Paris Agreement at the United Nations Climate Conference.
I look around this room and I see that the reaction is positive. I hear no objections. The Paris Climate Agreement is adopted.
Promoters of the carbon market present it as the solution to the climate crisis that the world is facing. In fact, it is far from being a solution to our current problems.
The era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived.
And yet all of Africa contributing the least to climate change but suffering some of the worst impacts. The droughts, right now we've had...
The drought that the Amazon is facing is one of the worst in history. The rivers are dry. They reduce the problem of the climate crisis to there being too much carbon dioxide, as if that were the problem. But in reality, the problem is much deeper, and it has to do with the production system. In order to solve the problem, the production system must be changed. So when they talk about carbon, they are talking about CO2, or carbon dioxide. This is the gas generated by the excessive burning of fossil fuels, such as oil, gas, and coal. These fuels are mostly used in the large industries, for example, aviation, oil, mining, and other industries. So, one of the great deceptions of the carbon market is to make us believe that this carbon dioxide, which is emitted in large amounts, can be offset by a forest or a plantation in a country far away from where the carbon has originally been emitted.
And the name they have given this supposed offset was carbon neutrality.
This alleged carbon neutrality is a lie because they continue to release a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, and the forests do not have the capacity to absorb this carbon.
And carbon credits are the currency they use to buy this alleged neutrality. When they buy carbon credits, companies are making a fictitious trade between the pollution they emit and the supposed absorption of this pollution by forests or plantations.
We call carbon credits pollution credits because they give these companies the right to pollute.
It is no coincidence that the main buyers of carbon credits are large destructive corporations and industries that emit a lot of pollution, such as oil, aviation, technology, and mining companies, among others.
These companies are experts in using carbon projects as a form of propaganda and a way to divert attention from the impacts they are causing.
Almost anyone can buy carbon credits to help compensate for their carbon footprint.
One of the most advanced gasolines in the world, which is now carbon neutral.
REDD projects are one of the main kinds of carbon projects. REDD stands for Reducing Carbon Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. What these projects do is invent a story. The story that without the carbon project, the forest would be destroyed.
With these projects, they always have to point to some threat, because otherwise, if there is no danger of deforestation, there is no carbon project. So they will always have to point to some threat to the forest. And in all of these carbon projects, there may be a logging company or perhaps another invader identified as a threat. But they always also point to the communities as a cause of deforestation.
According to the projects, when a community collects firewood or uses fire in a small area for cultivation, it is causing the same destruction and contamination as an oil or mining company. Carbon projects blame communities for deforestation and consequently impose restrictions and prohibitions on them regarding how they can use their own territories. Ultimately, these projects are not selling carbon. What they are selling is the promise to protect forests, saying that communities do not know how to or cannot protect the forests themselves. And they call that promise a carbon credit. These carbon credits are certified by companies such as Vera and then sold by private companies or NGOs. Vera has been involved in several scandals. Governments also sometimes implement REDD projects in much larger areas, which can cover several territories. These are called jurisdictional REDD or governmental REDD projects. But these projects are not actually better, nor do they represent less of a risk for communities.
The mechanism is perverse because REDD projects are not implemented in places where there is a lot of deforestation. Why is that? Because it is much more profitable to have large monoculture soybean and oil palm plantations and large-scale mining. These activities generate a lot more money than carbon projects. So, what actually happens? These projects are brought to forest areas that are not endangered, and there are always communities in these areas.
This is why Carbon Market is targeting many communities' territories, operating with a racist and colonial logic. This market has now unleashed a new wave of land grabbing in the global south.
Through this gathering, this conversation, this dialogue, this exchange of experiences, we have come to understand that everyone is going through the same thing. For us, it is essential to understand that REDD has already harmed many territories, communities, and people.
It's alarming for us to learn about the situation, how they're signing contracts with indigenous peoples and different kinds of contracts. They are very dangerous contracts where we could easily be deceived and become trapped by these projects and later face the effects and impacts when it's too late. Also, these contracts would be very long term.
When these projects come to the communities, they do not recognize our way of life. They do not recognize our cultures, customs, or traditions. Most of all, they do not recognize our traditional knowledge, which has always been passed down from generation to generation, in which we use nature as a means of subsistence.
Basically, this is about restricting and prohibiting us from even using these territories. That is, using the forest in the way we have historically used them as indigenous people.
This project comes from the top down. So, there are two visions of the territory. The vision of the community, our vision as peoples and traditional communities, and the vision of the big capitalist companies that are in the market, wanting to make more profits, and they want to continue polluting.
We're concerned about plans to promote climate capitalism as a solution for addressing climate change. With our people, our indigenous knowledge, this is wrong. It's evil to have a system of ownership of life itself, ownership of the air. So we are part of a movement to say no.
Our culture is the Kapu culture. We defend nature. Therefore, we do not negotiate nature for the market. This has to stop.
We don't want them to keep using our work of caring for, protecting and defending the forest so they can continue to have a green image in the world. A false green image, because here in my territory, they are greenwashing their image, and in other territories they are destroying, killing and dispossessing other indigenous peoples of their communal homes. It is hypocrisy on a global scale that this is not being talked about directly, because otherwise this COP wouldn't be in its 29th year, soon to be in its 30th year, and we are still not able to talk about a climate solution. This is why we have risen up and continue to resist, rejecting these false climate solutions.
And we must not accept these carbon credits. If we are going to defend our territories, then let it be for us.
Not REDD!